So there's a new chapter on the test server. Figured I'd give my literal day one impressions on it. To start off, I'm going to take a look at DBD's newest killer, the Trickster. Right, so I boot up the game and encounter this guy. I went into this mostly blind, but even with the teasers, I wasn't really expecting this dude. He's basically a K-pop star that suddenly got a bit of an urge to kill, leading him on a dark path that led to the entity. Pretty standard stuff, I suppose. Oh, and there's also a new survivor. Not really much else to say there. The Trickster is shockingly human looking, which I'm sure many could find a little out of place. It doesn't bother me too much personally, but I get the criticism. The Trickster's power basically lets him throw a bunch of knives, almost like a machine gun. Unlike Huntress, he needs to hit survivors with multiple knives to actually injure or down them. It has a completely unique system. Similarly to Huntress, however, he reloads his knives at lockers, just like her. He moves at 110% movement speed, and also has a slightly smaller than average 24-meter terror radius. He also has a special ability called Main Event. After charging it up, he can activate it, pretty much giving him a huge flurry of knives. He throws them even faster than usual, has an unlimited amount, and also moves at full speed while throwing. Keep in mind I'm making this video literally hours after the PTB launched, so there's a good chance I'll be completely wrong about some of my critiques of the Trickster's gameplay. We'll probably all look back and laugh at how wrong I was. Anyway, the Trickster's power is odd. He treads some familiar ground of previous killers, basically taking the ranged aspect of Huntress and the more machine gun-like aspect of the Plague. It makes for a really strange combination, but I definitely enjoyed the few games I played. Just going for a flurry of knife throws is pretty fun, no doubt about it. There were certain tiles that the Trickster felt pretty useless on. I think he'll end up being really map dependent, just like Huntress. The threat of his knives also doesn't seem to be nearly as deadly as Huntress's hatchets. I would wind up at pallets only to have people run through them, which makes complete sense. The real moments where the Trickster's power feels good happen when a survivor is locked into animation. One thing I do quite like about the Trickster is the visual and auditory feedback you get as both a survivor and killer. Survivors have unique screen effects show up as they start to get hit with more knives, letting them know they're in danger. There is also a unique cue that plays for both sides, letting everyone know when the survivor is one knife away from losing a health state. It's probably way too early to say how fun he is to face as a survivor, but I could definitely see people being annoyed by the more spammy nature of his power. It's somewhat reminiscent of Old Legion. You're almost guaranteed to get a few knife throws in there. As a whole, I think the Trickster's power is sort of uninspired. It really does just take a couple older killers' powers and combines them together. But I have to admit that despite this, he still manages to feel somewhat unique and fun. Now on to the aesthetics. This killer absolutely oozes personality from every fiber of his being. In the pregame lobby, he literally looks back and winks directly at you. It's kind of freaky. In game, he has an awesome flourish after hitting a successful attack, and his reload animation is freaking awesome. He also does these strange, creepy little laughs just while doing his thing. The Trickster makes grunting noises while moving survivors, making him feel a lot more human than even the Legion. Oh, and his Mori is probably one of the best. Again, just so much character is shown here. The Trickster is a performer at heart, for sure. If I ever get around to doing a retrospective over this chapter, I definitely have a lot to talk about. In the aesthetic department, this chapter is absolutely awesome. Speaking of that, I didn't even mention the menu yet. It really surprised me when I opened the game. This might be one of the best menus other than the Silent Hill one. These chapter-specific menus were such an awesome idea that I'm really glad Behavior kept up with. This one alone proves to me that they can really help set the mood of an update. There's a few new perks with this chapter, as is standard. The Trickster's first perk is Starstruck. It makes all survivors exposed while you're carrying a survivor on your shoulder, but it has a cooldown afterwards. I guess it's a neat way to prevent body blocking, but I don't see this being very good. Next up is Hex Crowd Control. I wasn't really expecting another Hex this time, but it's actually pretty good. Crowd Control blocks windows at Survivor's Vault for a short time while the Hex is active. Actually quite solid. It doesn't have a silly cooldown like Blood Favor, and has an effect that is quite applicable in many situations. I could see this one getting used a lot. Last up is No Way Out. It blocks the exit gate switches for a time, gaining up to 4 tokens by hooking each unique survivor in a match. It's similar to Remember Me, but instead of making the gate switches take longer, it just full on blocks them. People always get scared about endgame related perks, but I'm not too impressed by this one. It's not bad, but I probably won't ever use it personally. The Survivor also comes with 3 perks. I'm not even going to try and pronounce her name. Her first one is Fast Track. You get a token each time another survivor is hooked, and these tokens are all consumed by getting a great skill check on a generator. These tokens grant an additional progression bonus to that great skill check. Pretty cool idea, to be honest. I'm not sure it's that good, but I think it's a simple yet fun little gen progression perk. Next up is Smash Hit, a new exhaustion perk. This one gives you the standard exhaustion speed boost after stunning a killer with a pallet. People have been asking for something like this forever, and I'm glad it was finally added. Smash Hit is actually pretty neat. I could definitely see it becoming a new fun exhaustion perk to run. Last is Self-Preservation. This one hides your scratch marks for a few seconds when a nearby survivor gets hit. This one kind of sucks. It's really situational and hard to set up for an effect that isn't even that good. One last thing on the topic of perks, there were very little changes to existing perks, only one to be exact. Decisive Strike has finally received the update Behavior had planned for it. I touched on this a fair bit in my Myers video, but I really like this new direction for DS. It's much healthier for the game overall. There were some great changes to a couple killers in this update. Blight finally got his long-awaited POV change. Essentially, Blight's camera was really low before, but now he actually stands at normal height. I haven't played with this change personally since I was only playing the Trickster, but I'm glad this finally got in. Blight also got a change to his bumping. Apparently it now works similarly to lunge attacks. In the words of the patch notes, this should no longer result in sliding off various surfaces. I loved playing Blight before, but I cannot wait to give this a try in the live game. There were definitely some maps that had wonky collision, which this change should hopefully fix. Wraith got yet another buff, this time an increase to his base move speed while cloaked. Another awesome change, this is exactly what many people have been asking for. His Windstorm add-ons were also nerfed to compensate for this change, which makes complete sense. Very excited to give Wraith a go once this update comes out. This killer didn't come with a map, which is disappointing, but pretty standard at this point. We haven't gotten any new maps in a while, mainly because Behavior is going through and graphically updating all the older maps. It's hard looking at this menu and thinking of what could have been with a Trickster theme map though. Interestingly, this update also didn't include any of those graphic updates. Behavior said that the next realm, or realms, wouldn't be ready for this update. Gotta be honest, I have big respect to Behavior for making this decision. If it wasn't ready, I wouldn't want them to push out unfinished content, so I'm glad they just delayed it instead. One last thing this update included was the long-awaited colorblind support. Yet again, I'm glad this finally happened. I know it was a bit of a hot topic with the community recently, but I'm just happy there are accessibility settings for those that need them. As a whole, I'm not quite sure how to feel about all the new content yet. The Trickster definitely feels fun to play, but I worry that he isn't unique enough to stay fun in the long run. I'm quite impressed by the aesthetic aspects of the Trickster though. Very great visual and sound design coming from this guy. I also love the personality he provides. The perks this time are certainly hit or miss, at least as far as first impressions go. Some of them seem pretty fun, while others will likely see little play at all. I wish there had been more changes to older perks, but I'm still quite happy to see DS changed. The changes to Blight and Wraith are wonderful. They'll definitely make both of those killers more enjoyable to play. I wanted to share my first impressions, but I encourage everyone to not jump the gun on things, especially balanced discussions. It's often hard to tell immediately how strong or weak something can be, especially something like a killer's power. Give it some time and we'll see where the Trickster goes.